Hey everybody, and welcome to my little channel. Today I wanted to do kind of like a story time to share the story of how I met my husband and found myself living in Sweden. I wrote some notes. It's a pretty long story, so I'm going to try to keep this as concise as possible. So back when I was in college, at around 2005, I met a guy at my gym. His name was Matt, and we started to date. And we dated for about, I think, like maybe 2.5 or 3 years. We broke up shortly after I graduated college. He was he was American, but he was half Swedish, half French. And earlier in my life, well, basically all of my life, I've been really into different cultures and languages and ways to communicate. I just think it's interesting and it's added a lot of value to my life. So I'd always been into like Latin cultures, and I think I studied Spanish for about 9 years throughout school. So I was kind of like immersed in sort of Latin cultures and stuff up to the point where I met Matt. So with all of that said, when I met Matt, I found him to be incredibly interesting, and throughout our relationship, he taught me, how to say certain phrases. He taught me how to say, certain words, and he taught me a lot about the socio-political environment in Sweden. And it was completely different from everything I had grown up with just in my own family life, and then everything I've learned from like the Romance cultures. I mean, everything was different, at least the way he described it. So I was sucked into it right away. And so, our relationship kind of like went through its life cycle. And after I graduated, we just kind of went separate ways. And that was that. But I really missed that link to Swedish language and culture and learning and that kind of stuff. I really missed having that exposure. So several years went by, and I used certain websites like LiveMocha and Interpals. I used LiveMocha is like a community-based language learning free website, I guess. It's really cool. And then Interpals is all just for pen pals, international pen pals. And so I tried meeting different people through that, but maybe not so much. I never really responded to anyone who sent me messages, and it was kind of all creepers anyway. But finally, it was February 17th of 2010. It was a rainy day. I had gotten home from work and I was procrastinating going to the gym. And I decided, hey, how about I take my ex-boyfriend's last name, and it's a very common Swedish last name. What if I plug it into Facebook and see if I couldn't, send a message to someone and see if they'd want to be a pen pal with me. So I did that. I took his last name and, typed it into Facebook, pulled up a list, and I picked the third person on the list to send a message to. And the reason I picked the third was because I decided that if I'm going to do this and I'm going to have a pen pal and conceivably a friend on the other side of the world, I wanted it to be a guy, because, it's just more fun that way. Like, it would be kind of creepy if I sent a message to a girl. Like, honestly, who would do that? And I wanted him to be like in my age range and possibly attractive, because, it's fun that way. So the third guy on the list, I couldn't see anything in his profile except for his profile picture. His profile was pretty much locked down. If I can find the picture that he had as his profile picture, I will flash it on the screen right now. But anyway, so I sent him a message and I basically said, hey, you don't know me at all, but I'm trying to learn Swedish, and I was wondering if you'd like to message back and forth and maybe teach me some slang and stuff, because what I'm learning on this LiveMocha program or in books and stuff, it's just not adequate. So the next day, I finally received a response from him, and he said, sure, what do you want to learn? What do you want to talk about? And so we had maybe 2 or 3 days of exchanges where it was like partly in Swedish, but my Swedish conversational and like written skills, any skills, were so horribly lacking. Like I was relying completely on Google Translate, and this was back in 2010. So Google Translate of 2010 is much different than Google Translate of today. That, like, we were just not getting anywhere. It was taking me an entire day to write a single message to him. So we started writing in English, and we just started talking, the basics, like, why are you trying to learn Swedish, and that kind of stuff. And we went back and forth, and we sort of struck up this natural curiosity in each other. And I was just as like excited and curious about him as he was in me. And later on, he would tell me that all his life he had wanted to travel to LA, which was where I was living in Los Angeles at the time. And, he actually thought that one of his friends was pranking him, that some random girl from California would be messaging him. So he almost didn't respond to me, he said. But it was in the middle of winter, and he had finished school for that semester and didn't have a job and had nothing to do. So he decided, what do I have to lose? So that's why we started messaging. We talked every single day for hours. I changed my whole work schedule so that I could get home by like, I think 3 p.m. And then we would talk like maybe for 5 hours a day. And my husband actually flipped his entire like sleeping rhythm upside down. So he would be up all night just chatting with me because we had a 9-hour time difference. He'd be up like all night, and then he'd go to bed, like 4 or 5 in the morning and sleep. And that's what we would do every day. And so I think like maybe 2 months after, it had to have been 2 months after we met online, I decided I wanted to visit him. I wanted to go out and visit him. I'd never been to Sweden before. So we thought, okay, this is kind of crazy, but sure, let's do it. So I actually took a loan from my 401k to be able to afford this trip because I just graduated college. I had like $120,000 in student loans because I went to a private university. So and then I just had like an entry-level job at a bank. So, I was not making that much money. So I borrowed money against myself so that I could buy the tickets and have some spending cash when I went. But in April of 2010, the Icelandic volcano erupted, which shut down all international airspace. I will put the name of the volcano somewhere here. I can't pronounce it. I don't even know. I can't. So that volcano erupted. I had to cancel my flight because I couldn't fly. There's like this world-ending natural disaster. And so that was the first trip of ours that got canceled. So later that year in September, I had booked another flight to go visit his name is Yuan. So I had booked another flight to visit him and ended up having to cancel that flight too because his uncle developed a cancer that they thought was terminal. And he told me, look, you could still come, but like just honestly speaking, I'm not going to be able to travel around and be happy. So I'm like, of course, that totally makes sense. I was devastated. I was devastated when I had to cancel my flight the first time. But that was a really, really hard one because, we had been talking every day and like trying to keep the momentum of these conversations going with the idea in mind that we would eventually meet soon. But like, we never did run out of things to talk about, but it was just crushing because I had no idea when I'd be able to go back out and try to visit him. And part of me was sort of paranoid thinking, like, what if he like doesn't want to see me? What if, we've talked for so long and now it's just maybe kind of weird or intimidating and maybe he doesn't want me to go out. But we kept talking every day. We obviously ran out of the standard things to talk about. We kind of went through it all. So we started doing these things that we called virtual vacations, where we downloaded Google Earth onto our computers, and we would take each other, like we would give each other coordinates, like meet me at this latitude, this longitude, right? And we started off showing each other around the places we grew up. We showed each other our childhood houses, our schools, old places we worked at, or like if we had told stories to each other in the past, like, oh, this was where that one party happened, or this is where I had that one fight, or whatever. We would go to that place. And you can drop your little man down to like ground level street view and see. We did that for like a month and a half. We would like we wouldn't split a bottle of wine, but we'd each bring a bottle of wine to our Skype calls, and like, we'd drink, and God, there were so many Friday and Saturday nights where we got wasted together and just talked. We both play guitar, and so we started jamming together using Skype, which was really cool. We'd just pick a song and try to like harmonize and stuff. We would record songs and send each other them on YouTube. I've actually got a couple. If I'm brave enough, I'll put the links down in the description box if you want to see my like songs that I sent him. Anyway. Yeah, so we had to be creative with our conversations. But then in 2011, he took a new job in Norway, and I took a new job in West LA. So because he was now working, he had to be on regular hours, I guess. And since I had a new job, I couldn't modify my work schedule anymore. So kind of like pretty much for all of 2011, we very sparsely talked. Like we still stayed in touch, and every so often, like every weekend or so, we would have one of those times where we'd just spend 8 hours talking and catching up on stuff. But then I dated a little, and he got really into the social scene in Norway, and we just kind of drifted apart for that year. And, little things would bring us back together. I still called him my best friend, but we were not as active as we used to be. I want to go back and say that after that first year in 2010, I knew I loved him. And I never said anything to anyone about it because it was crazy, and I hadn't met him. I didn't know really anything about him. I mean, there's one thing to get to know someone very deeply, like on a profound level from a distance, but it's another thing to get to know them in person. Like, you don't know if they have like weird body odor, or what if they have like bad oral hygiene, or like there are just things that sort of like can be major turn off red flags that you don't get from a distance. You got to be like in person to get those things. So I only half let myself feel the way I felt, but that feeling never went away. And like I said, I dated a little bit on and off throughout those first years of us knowing each other. But nobody ever measured up to the bar he set. Like, he got me. He understood me on so many levels. I've had a very difficult life in a lot of ways, and so has he. So we really understand each other, and the reasons why we may think or feel or act the way we do, which is so refreshing because I feel like I can never be my full self around people. At least I couldn't around people in LA, because either they didn't care or they didn't understand, or it was just all too much for them. So I'd just always be this shell of a person, and it was so boring, But with you one, everything was like there was no end to our conversations. It was like digging a hole at the beach. Nothing ever bottomed out. You could just keep going deeper and deeper and deeper, and it would lead to new conversations. And I just loved it. I loved it. I loved him. But anyway, so that was 2011. 2012 came, and that was a bad year for me because I had been battling cervical precancer for a couple years up to that point. And then in one of my routine screenings, I decided to get like a regular women's wellness, like a broader check by my OBGYN. And she found a tumor in my left breast. So that was horrifying. And I found that out early in 2012. So I went to the Pink Lotus Breast Center in Beverly Hills, which if you live there, highly recommend it. Highly recommend it. I can't remember my doctor's name now. This was several years ago. But man, were they good. And I had a couple ultrasounds. They monitored it for a couple years. Sorry, a couple months. Like 6 months they monitored it. I never needed a biopsy because the specialist I had concluded that it was hamartoma and that it was benign, at least for now. So that I would want to keep an eye on it in the future because these things can turn like cancerous in the future. But he said that it was big enough that they wouldn't want to remove it because it would be disfiguring. So, you know, it was obviously my choice, but I chose not to have anything done with it at that time. So once I got the final assessment that it was benign, I had sort of one of those aha moments where it was like, I need to go on a sabbatical adventure. I need to get out of this rat race I'm in. I've been slaving away at my jobs, trying to pay off my student loans. I had finally paid them off. I had gotten a lot of my debt under control, and I was young and I was healthy for that, for now, in that moment. And I said, okay, now it's time. It's time. It's time for me to go meet Yuan. We had kind of rekindled our conversation in the months prior. So I told him, look, I want to come visit you. It's going to be my birthday in October. I want to come visit you for my birthday and, you know, maybe come out for 3 or 4 weeks. And, you know, I've got a little bit more money and you've got some more money. And so let's do this. Let's just have this adventure. So he was in the process of actually acquiring his house, which is now the house we live in. But the way escrow was going in Sweden, it was going much, much slower than he had hoped. And the house also needed a lot of work before like it was livable. So I had booked my flights like well in advance, and we thought for sure that he would have had the house and it would have been, you know, had like the proper renovations done. But by the time my flight came around, he hadn't even gotten the keys to the house, and he was staying with his parents at the time in a really small house, and there was no room for me, and I couldn't afford a hotel. And so it never happened. I had to divert my flights, and I went to Spain, and I backpacked through Spain for like, yeah, almost a month. I was gone. I think I did like 2.5 or 3. I did 3 weeks in Spain and then a week in London. And in the very, very end, when I was in London, it turns out that he got the keys. He got the keys like actually during my Spain trip, but he was able to rush and get these like renovations done and whatever. And he said, come, you can come. He sent me this message and he's like, it's good. It's a little sketchy, but just come. I've got the space. Let's do this. But I think I only had 4 days left in my trip. And I looked up flights and they were like £600 to get me round trip just from Heathrow to the small airport near where Yuan lived. And I could not afford it. I couldn't see past spending that much money for what would end up being only about 48 hours essentially, because one day would be travel and then I'd be with him, and then I'd have to turn around and get back to Heathrow so that I could get my flight back to LA. So I just couldn't do it. And this movie quote from one of my favorite movies, Gattaca, came to my mind. And this quote has like haunted me my whole life. And I'm paraphrasing this. I never realized how far away I was from my dream than when I was standing right beside it. And that's how I felt. I was so close to him. I was so close. I was so close, and I just couldn't get to him. So I flew home, but that was October of 2012. And he and I continued to talk, but then in 2013, I decided to go on this like epic fitness kick. I decided I wanted to kind of redefine myself and take a different, get like a different outlet in life and pursue some new goals and sort of try to figure out what I'm doing with my life. Because up to that point, I had a lot of failed relationships in LA. I had this one relationship in Sweden with this person that I knew I loved and knew he was the one. I know that sounds so cheesy, but I could not let him go. it just, nothing was ever to the depth that it was with you one. But then I got a devastating back injury and couldn't travel at all. But the good thing about that 2013 back injury was that I got back to talking on a daily basis with you one, because I was in this therapy and recovery. I couldn't do much. I was like bedbound for a couple months. So we like really rekindled that deep connection that we had. And, you know, now it's, 3, almost 4 years since we met online. And so a lot of things had changed. We had changed as people. So then in 2014, in the spring, we both said, now's the time. We both had good jobs. We had good careers. We had money. We had living spaces established. We were at a point in our lives where we were ready for this. So I booked my flights for summer of 2014, and I made it out here. And, you know, those first couple hours, where, like, I mean, I stumbled off of the train. You know, I had no idea where he was, where to find him. And all of a sudden, like, there he was. And I just, you know, and that's exactly how it was. My breath got trapped in my throat, like deep inside. And I thought I was going to choke for a minute. And, you know, he was just flushed red. Just like we were both so full of like, oh my God. My God, was he beautiful. Oh my gosh, I'm gonna cry. I'm gonna cry thinking about that moment. I loved him so much already. And we had only been in each other's physical presence for like a fraction of a second. And I had all these fears because, like, you know, it had been 4.5 years since we had like met online. And we had been through so much together. You know, I've only told you guys my side of it. He, for the sake of his privacy, I won't talk about what he had been through, but he had been through so much that we had gotten through together. And, you know, you get to know someone from the inside out, and it almost doesn't matter anymore what they look like or any like weird oddities about them, because you already love you love their soul. You love them on such a different level. But at the same time, it all is crazy, because who does this? You know, like, who does this? And so you just don't know. I had all these fears, and they just, you know, within the first 30 minutes of being in the car with him, they were gone. You know, he didn't have any weird body odor, or like, he had great teeth and he was beautiful, and, you know, his voice sounded just the same as it did on Skype. And I don't even know why I'm getting so emotional telling this story, but I remember reaching out and touching him, and it was such a special moment. Because it's, you know, you spend every day dreaming for 4.5 years of what it would be like to just touch this person and to be able to hug them. You know, even if we had just stayed best friends, he was my best friend. And he had helped me through so much. He had seen me through so much. He had never judged me. And you know, vice versa. And to have the luxury of being able to hug this person, it was just like surreal. It was surreal. So anyway, we had this trip. It was only like 2.5 weeks long. It was amazing. It was the best. It was a really good trip, and I had a movie moment at the airport. I bawled my brains out when he left me at the airport. And not only did I cry the whole way up the escalator, the whole way through security, the whole way to my gate, but I bawled the entire flight from Sweden to Copenhagen, where I picked up my connecting flight. And I sat next to this Greek guy, and thank God for him, because he knew what was going on. He had been through it himself, and he gave me so much encouragement. He even gave me his phone number to call him if I ever needed like a friend to talk to, which I thought was really sweet. I don't remember his name, which is sad, but I'm very thankful he was there because it helped me a lot. But anyway, so Yuan planned a trip to come visit me at the end of that year, and so he and his best friend came out for an entire month from mid-December to mid-January, 2014 to 2015. And his best friend I became good friends with, and I had to work a lot during those dates, so we decided it would be good for him to have Anthony come as well so that they could do stuff together. And we had the wildest trip. It was the greatest thing ever. I'm going to also link a video below that's sort of like pictures of really our whole relationship, but mostly that trip because it was wild. So much fun. So at the end of that trip, we decided that we needed to be together, and we couldn't do this back and forth anymore, that we needed to be with each other. So Yuan went home, I think January 12th of 2010, and then on January 16th, I submitted my application to Migrationsverket for my residence permit, uppehållstillstånd. And it's this Sambo visa that they talk about. And back then, there was not any information. And now, by the way, if you don't want to hear anything about migration to Sweden, you can just end this video now, because now I'm getting into my experience with the catastrophe that was immigrating. We submitted our application January 16th, 2015. And back then, there were no support groups. There were no known migration crises at the time. I mean, there was an ongoing one, but people didn't really talk about it as much. But, I had assumed that we had this very well-documented relationship. We met easily all of the requirements for me to be able to migrate. Marriage was not necessary, and back then, maintenance requirements, which I believe is called vergunningskravet, kraver, whatever, were also not necessary. So we met all the requirements and then some in order for me to be able to migrate. So we thought, this is me being naive. Forgive my ignorance because I know this is going to sound horrible. But I said to myself, I've got a job, I've got my education, I'm coming with money. This is not going to take long at all. This is going to take 2 months, 3 months max. So I had gone onto some blogs and I had read, but all these blogs were from like 2012, 2013. And they were all saying the same thing, like, oh yeah, 6 weeks it took me to get my residence permit. It took me like 4 weeks. It took me 8 weeks. So I thought for sure it was going to be quick. But then there was this forum called The Local, and I'm reading these threads today, well, not today, but like real time back then, and people are waiting like 9 months, 10 months, 11 months. And I went on to Migrationsverket's website. No, Migrationsverket. Migrationsverket or Migrationsverket? God, I can't even remember anymore. Anyway, MV. Went onto their website, and they seemed to say that it could take like a long time to get your residence permit. So started a blog, which became overwhelmingly popular, which I did not plan for it to happen, but it was called Heja Herringa. And the intention of that was to sort of track my experience, log my experience, because I was realizing that all the blogs that were available about migrating to Sweden at the time seemed to be quite outdated, because they're saying like 6 weeks or 8 weeks you'll get your permit. And here, looking at this website, it doesn't even sound like I'm going to be getting my permit in like 6 or 8 months, which was devastating because, you have your partner, you love your partner, you want to be with your partner. We were ready to have this relationship. We were completely emotionally committed and invested, and at that point in our lives where we didn't want to wait. And for the record, I was 31. I was either 30 or 31. Whatever. I think I was 31. I was getting older, and we wanted to have children and like a family and stuff. And I'm like ready to go. That biological clock is ticking. And here you're telling me that I might have to wait upwards of a year to migrate? and like put all these dreams and goals and ideas and thoughts on hold. It was devastating. But we still held on to hope. And, Yuan was completely in denial and convinced that it was only going to take a couple months. And here, the American side of me is like, where is that part of MV's website where I can pay the extra couple $100 and get my application expedited? It's like capitalist thinking. And it was an extremely rude awakening to learn a couple things: that it did not matter where I came from, what my socioeconomic background was, what my educational background was. It didn't matter if I was the Queen of England or the poorest person, in the slums of whatever. It didn't matter. I was going to have to wait my turn. There was no way to pay a fee and get my application expedited. If anything, it was the other way around, because as the year unfolded, more and more people in the family reunification permit department, which is what my application was in, were being pulled away and put into the asylum and refugee processing departments to get people who needed it very desperately, their residence permit and paperwork processing, to get them into Sweden quicker than those of us love-struck idiots who, there was no reason to prioritize our cases at all. In my blog, Heja Herrljunga, I wrote an open letter, I called The Seas We Swim. And I kind of just spilled my heart out and had sort of this moral crisis where, oh my gosh, let me back up real quick for anyone who's not familiar with the chaos that happened in 2015. So Syria was just getting destroyed by its government. And there was a open call by Angela Merkel to the EU and to those who were suffering from like war and terrorism to come to Europe and seek asylum. That there is room in Europe to help you. People were arriving and drowning by the boatloads trying to escape from the Middle East on the Greek shores. And it was just this epic catastrophe, migration catastrophe, humanitarian crisis. But Sweden was exceptionally open to having people come in, and they also had an exceptionally liberal policy at the time that if you were granted refugee status, that you would, I think, immediately get permanent residency. And you didn't need to have a job or anything. Like, the social welfare system was going to take care of these people and help them get back on their feet and establish a new life, which is amazing, right? Is totally amazing. However, it created an obvious catastrophe in that everyone came to seek asylum in Sweden, including those who did not qualify for it. Like, you need to actually prove that you meet the qualifications for refugee status or subsidiary protection, which they have since gotten rid of. You can't get subsidiary protection in Sweden anymore. And so it backlogged. I mean, I think people were arriving by the hundreds of thousands per month, or maybe it was like tens of thousands per month. It was devastating. And so this is all happening during our migration wait. And it only got worse and worse and worse and worse and worse as our wait went on. I think the crisis really started to begin in the summer of 2015, after we had already waited like 6 months. And as we monitored Migrationsverket's website, the estimated waiting time got exponentially longer and longer and longer. And every time we were at the cusp of making it to like the window of you can expect a decision in this time range, that time range would like freaking double. So we decided we were going to have a wedding in October of 2015 in the States, because we assumed that by October, like 9 months after we applied, that we would have our decision, and that wedding could also be sort of my going away party, and then I would move to him. We ended up having to cancel that wedding because we realized that our permit was not going to be ready by then. So that's when I wrote that open letter to Migrationsverket, basically having this moral crisis where it's like, on the one hand, I totally get that I can't like cry or be like, well, I guess of course I can cry, but I really can't be like, woe is me. You need to prioritize my case because I love somebody and my heart is breaking, and you need to approve my freaking residence permit so I can move at the expense of hundreds of thousands of people who were losing their children on, to drownings, as they were fleeing their war-torn, terrorist-filled, home countries to seek shelter and the hope of survival in this life. I couldn't, of course, you couldn't reconcile having a, sorry, my eye is twitching, I don't know if you can see. You can't reconcile having a broken heart and trying to escape with your life, I can't, anyway. So it was very, very difficult. It was so difficult because putting aside the fact that this whole thing and having your whole life up in the air, and desperately missing the person you love and spending a fortune traveling back and forth to be with them and keep the relationship going, and watching, each cycle come and go, and realizing how badly you want to have children, and that you might not be able to make it happen anytime soon. It was just devastating. But then to realize, like, I can't cry. Like, what do I have to complain about? I have a job, I have a family, I have friends, I've got a great life in LA, and I will get my residence permit. It will get approved. I just have to be patient and not be so freaking selfish. It was so difficult. The whole thing was difficult. I kind of went crazy. I started this insane spreadsheet tracking cases, thousands of cases, trying to get an idea of when I could expect a decision in my case. I needed like an end time. I couldn't have this open-ended, date. I needed something to look forward to, and with the migration crisis being the way it was, I needed to keep my finger on the pulse of the situation and see how the waiting times were evolving so that I wouldn't go crazy. If anything, it was just a good distraction, and I guess I ended up helping. No, I know I ended up helping a lot of people because my obsession with needing to find this general idea of when I could put an end to my own misery, my obsession with like coming up with some sort of date in the future that I could fix my eyes on, I indirectly created the same thing for like thousands of other people that were also waiting and looking for information and stuff. So that was really awesome, being able to connect to people around the world and provide something meaningful in a time where everything felt so meaningless, and informationless, in the wait that we were in. So, Yuan visited me in October of 2015. And then, so the way the spreadsheet had worked, we realized that like we could pretty much assume that we would get a decision by, I think it was March, between February and March. It was like 13 and a half months was the average wait time at that time. And so we made the decision that I would come visit him for a month from mid-December to mid-January of 2015-2016 so I could spend the holidays with him. I got it approved from my work. They sent me with like my computers and everything so that I could work from home, and yeah, so everything was good. We decided in that time that we knew we would get our decision within a couple months, and this was going to be the last time I could visit Yuan, or that we would be able to see each other at all, until I finally moved. So we kind of bit the bullet and said, you know what, we're tired of waiting to build a family, so let's just try. Let's try just this one time and see if maybe we could conceive, with the thought in mind that if we conceived now, I'd be able to get like the barfy weeks done with before I moved. And I didn't want him to see me go through all that shit anyway, so that seemed pretty ideal to me. And I'd be able to visit my doctors and specialists in the States before I moved, because, as I mentioned in a previous video of mine, and I think I also mentioned in this video, I went through a period of about 10 years where I was needing routine surgeries on my cervix because I had non-HPV cervical lesions. They never became fully cancerous, but they were, at the worst, they were precancerous. And I was told that because of the scar tissue I had on my cervix, that I could end up with struggling with infertility. Because I have this one bit of scar tissue that's toward the opening of my, this is TMI, opening of my cervix that could prevent it from dilating properly, and you know. So we said, my doctors told me that it could take us up to 2 years. So we said, screw it, let's try once. And if it works, then I can see my specialists back at home and get like monitored in those first several weeks and then move here. And then during my pregnancy, I could work on getting my driver's license, and I could work on my Swedish, get my SFI classes going. And then I'd have the baby, and then, you know, whatever. And we just had such rose-colored glasses on our, you know, on our eyes. We just thought it was all going to be so easy, and like everything would happen sequentially. Which was partially true, because sure as shit, I was scheduled to go back home January 17th of 2016. That was the end of my trip. Mind you, we applied for my residence permit on January 16th of 2015. Okay, so on January 16th of 2016, the night before I was supposed to fly home on our 1-year application anniversary, I was officially 1 day late on my period. So we took a pregnancy test, and it was positive. It was very positive, extremely positive. And we jumped for joy. We had informed Migrationsverket that I was going to be, you know, in Sweden over the holidays and stuff, and we knew we were cutting it close because we knew it was close to my decision time. So the second I got home, I sent pictures of my passport and my US, a picture of my US re-entry customs slip that you get when you fly back into the States from being abroad. And I sent them so much shit just to prove that I was out of Sweden, because I didn't want it to delay my decision anymore. And I was also kind of whimsically hoping that that might trigger a decision, because sometimes you see that later on when you kind of touch upon the right person in Migrationsverket, that you might be able to kind of trigger a decision. Anyway, and I also told them, by the way, I am pregnant, and I like sent them a picture of the pregnancy test, and I'm like, should I send a doctor's note confirming it, you know, blah, blah, blah. I just figured that it'd make it really easy for them to give us a decision. But it didn't have any effect, at all. We waited exactly 13 and a half months. We got our decision. Am I ruining the moment? Should I like lead up to this? If I'm gonna lead up to it, I had been morning sick. For several weeks. I got hit by a car, and that was sort of the breaking point for my husband. He said, that is it, enough is enough. He called Migrationsverket and said, look it, we have been waiting 13 months, we know the data, we know the numbers, we know the averages, we are there, it is our turn, we know it. He's like, my fiance is pregnant, she just got hit by a car. You know, and back then Zika was also an issue. We want our decision now. So we found out we had a case officer, and that case officer got sick, and then the team leader was on vacation, and then when the team leader came back, blah, 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 who knows, whatever. Finally, we got the decision. We got that decision. I'll never forget that moment. I was sitting at my computer and happened to look at my emails and saw the email there. And at the same time, my husband had, ironically, just called me, and I thought it was because maybe he saw the same email. So I just was sobbing on the phone, sobbing. I couldn't get any words out. I thought he already knew. I didn't realize that only I got the email because he didn't have power of attorney. And he thought I had miscarried, and he's like, "Oh my God, what's going on? Like, are you bleeding? Like, or what is happening?" And I'm like, "We got the decision." It was amazing. So, I moved a month later, and I've skipped so many details in this. I skipped our interview. Our interview was a piece of cake. I came in with a binder of screenshots and pictures and a CD with some videos that I had made burned onto it. I'll put the links to like those relationship videos that I made for Migrationsverket. I actually made those for my interview to like prove our relationship. I'll put those links down below if you're interested at all in seeing. My interviewer in San Diego didn't want to see shit. She didn't want to see anything. She wanted to confirm the dates that I visited Yuan, and like the dates we had written in our application about how we met. She wanted to know my plans for when I arrive in Sweden, what my plans would be. She wanted to know, she wanted to see my passport, of course, and my single status documents. She wanted to see the original copies that I had provided, which were just notarized. I created a single status affidavit that I got notarized because my home state doesn't have like single status paperwork. And then I also provided my original tax documents. God, I don't know. If you're really interested in the details of all these things, like the things I went through during my migration wait, I'll also link my blog down below. I don't write in it anymore. I haven't written on it basically since my daughter was born. But I do have a lot of information. A lot of it is stale at this point because the migration situation has changed a lot. However, like details of my interview and stuff are all there, and like some softer qualitative emotional blogs are there if you're at all interested in that sense of community. But yeah, in summer of 2015 I moved out of my apartment because I thought it would only be like a couple more months before I got my decision, and I moved back home. And so I had been living at home for 9 months, and I had pretty much gotten rid of all of my belongings. So once we got the decision, I went to work that next Monday and broke the news, because I never told them at all throughout this wait what our plans were, because there was no way to be for sure about when we'd get our decision, and I was afraid my company was going to fire me or just be fed up with waiting for me to get this decision so that they knew when to hire someone else. So I told them then, and signed my severance package paperwork a couple weeks later, and I was gone. March 22nd of 2016. I was 14 weeks pregnant. I had a going away party / baby shower in the States. And then, yeah, March 22nd, I took that one-way flight to Sweden. I carried with me my decision paperwork, which I did not translate, but I did need to show that to the ticket agents at LAX. Even though I still had plenty of time on my tourist visa, so there was no reason for them to prevent me from traveling, they still wanted to see that document because I was traveling on a one-way ticket. And, whatever. But yeah, I got there and collapsed into the arms of my most amazing husband. Oh God, I'm gonna cry again, you guys. I just love him so much. It's not been easy. I've been living here now 18 months, and I still don't have my driver's permit or license. Sorry, I can't bring myself to do it. I just can't bring myself to do it, but I'm going to. Over this winter, I've got to, because we're planning on having a second child, and I need to have my license before that baby is born. I'm just now starting to apply for jobs because my daughter is now of age to start Förskola. But in that time, like the pregnancy was amazing. We remodeled our entire house. Like I was 3rd trimester pregnant, taking sponge baths in our kitchen sink because we decided to demo our bathroom during my pregnancy. But we did a whole house remodel, got the house ready, made a whole extra bedroom so that my daughter had a nursery. We had a baby and became first-time parents, which was insane. And if I knew how hard it was, I don't know, man. Maybe I would have waited a little bit. I mean, that migration wait was the best thing to happen to us for two reasons. The first being, I was able to save up so much money that I've been able to pretty much be a stay-at-home mom for the past 2 years, like my whole pregnancy plus the past 13 months, and live just off of my savings, contribute that way. But also, if we were able to survive that migration wait, I knew and I had full confidence in our relationship that even though we never lived together before, that we would be able to survive anything together in person. And I needed that confidence because, man, you know, as you can see if you're interested in any of my other videos, I got diagnosed with postpartum premenstrual dysphoric disorder, which was gnarly and took a toll on us big time. But we got through it. We got through it. We got through a house remodel. We got through the first year of having a baby. We got through my crazy hormonal imbalance situation. We've made it through it all. And I'm applying for jobs now. So, I mean, I'll be able to have a job and we're going to have another kid soon, hopefully. We've been through a lot. It'll be 8 years this February. The time of the recording of this video, it's mid-October 2017. And in February of 2018, it will be 8 years since I sent that message. So, fate. If you believe in it, then so be it. Soulmates, if you believe in it, then so be it. But you just never know. The smallest, silliest, most off-the-cuff decisions you make in life could end up resulting in you living on the other side of the world with a husband and a baby. We got married June 17th. I think that was our marriage date of this year, 2017. After like planning and canceling various weddings for various reasons. But that's our story. That's how I met my husband, and that was my immigration story. And I finally have it recorded, and this is like an hour-long video, so I'm sorry about that. But if you have any questions about the migration process, please feel free to leave them in the comments below. I feel like I'm a walking encyclopedia of Swedish migration, albeit my information and knowledge is starting to get quite stale. But I'll be applying for my extension, which will be a permanent residency, at the end of January of next year. So that's coming up. And then hopefully, as long as the laws stay the same, I will be applying for citizenship a year after that. So crazy, 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 crazy. What a crazy adventure we've been on. Anyway, that's my story. I will end this now. I'm going to link all those things below, like I said, and if I can come up with some pictures, I'll pop them up here just for fun. Okay. Bye, guys.